Welcome back to Alpha to Omega. Today we'll be continuing our discussion about time. So let's get right into it. Time is writing. As we talked about in our prior video, time is writing. It is the flow of being from moment to moment to moment to moment. Time isn't physically out there. Nobody can actually show you time in and of itself. Rather, the human being experiences the infinitesimally smallest moment. And in our perception of reality, we take prior moments, the present moment, and all future moments and sequence them together in our construction of time. It is just like watching a film that's being projected onto a screen. Every frame is being projected and can be thought of as a singular moment. Yet, in its totality, do we perceive a film or a movie. Yet the film in and of itself is not being projected all at once. Or in other words, we construct the narrative of the film, the entire movie, in our perception through each individual frame that is being projected onto the screen. That is time. And to go further, if there was no time, there would be no space, because we perceive reality through the flow of being, through things being constantly written into being by the author of those things. If things weren't being written into being at every moment, there would be no narrative to speak about, and therefore there would be no book to read. In other words, you, nor I, nor anything else would happen to be. Therefore, writing is necessary for us to perceive reality. In other words, there just cannot be space. There cannot just be objects, material objects like you or I. Rather, those things not only have to be written into being at any particular moment, but all moments, such that we can perceive things through our human consciousness and therefore conclude that there must be an author to this world. Grammar in time. Now, as we perceive things as they come into being from moment to moment to moment, we also perceive that there is an order in which those things are being brought into being. For example, we observe not only the sun comes into being, is being written into being by its author, but it's being written into being in a particular way, such that it has a particular shape and size and color and heat and light, and it follows a particular course from moment to moment to moment to moment. Even though that course is changing, there is still an order to it. Therefore, what we can say then is the way in which things come into being is the grammar of the author, or in other words, the order in which he brings things into being, or how he writes things into being. Just like time, no one can actually demonstrate to you physically the order. Rather, it is the perception through time, or in other words, the perception through moments in which we ascertain that there is an order. But yet, it is not physically out there. What that means then is that the objects themselves don't possess the order in and of themselves. They don't know anything about how to come into being in a particular way. Because if we were to say that they have the will to make themselves come into being or write themselves into being at a particular moment, and then write themselves into being at any subsequent moment, how do they know how to write themselves into being in future moments to conform to a order? And if they do conform to that order, then do they have any will to speak of? Because then are they subject to the order? Are they slaves of the order? Which would negate their own will. In other words, there can only be one singular absolute will, and it's not the objects that possess them, rather it's a will, an absolute will, more specifically, that is beyond the objects themselves. That only brings them into being at one moment, but every subsequent moment, and through those moments do we perceive an order, which we can call the grammar of the world, or in other words, how the author writes things into being at any moment. Human choice in time. Where that leaves human beings then is that while we can make a choice, we can choose things, we can't determine the outcome of those choices. Because just like the sun can't determine its own being, and therefore how it comes into being at any subsequent moment through time or through all subsequent moments, we too can make a choice, but we cannot determine the outcome in time or in any particular moment in the future. Therefore, we are subject to the will of the author of this world, and therefore the author of our being. While we cannot escape the order in which he brings things into being or how he writes things into being at any particular moment, we can sort of choose or ask that through our choice, please bring something into being at a particular moment. For example, when I drink a glass of water, I can choose or make the intent to say that I'm going to drink a glass of water. However, I can't determine the outcome such that I will have the ability to drink water, that water will even happen to be, and that even when I drink the water, that it will follow a particular order or process such that it is agreeable to my body and it quenches my thirst and nourishes me. In other words, there is no such thing as free will, there is just will or human will. And that will of mine can only choose or ask, so to speak. And it is the absolute will, the author's will, that determines the outcome. In other words, he must be the causer of all effects. There is no causality in the world, truthfully. There are only effects, or in other words, the act of writing, the act of creating, moment to moment to moment to moment. Human purpose in time. All that to say then is that human beings can only choose, or in other words, they can only ask for things to come into being. That is their responsibility. However, because they have a consciousness, because they have an awareness of the past, the present, and the future, and therefore of time, or this notion of time, that again doesn't physically exist out there, one can say that even when they do ask, they can be held responsible for the consequences of those actions, of those choices, because they know what the likely outcome is to be. Therefore, time is really the metric through which human beings are judged, or in other words, how they get to know the author, and therefore how the author gets to know them through their conduct. One simple example would be if one were in school and they are subject to the order of the teacher such that the teacher assigns them certain readings and homeworks and examinations. The student can't escape that method, that process, the rules in which the classroom is governed. However, they can make the choice to study or to not study. If they make the choice to not study, they suffer the consequences of those choices, which is failure of the class. However, if they make the choice to study, they can potentially succeed. That is the purpose of man in this universe, that he is given choice or will, not will to make things happen to be, whereas that is in the author's domain, rather the choice to ask for something to be, and therefore judged according to that. Otherwise, what other purpose would there be for human will? The question may now be asked, how does man know what to do with the will he is given when there are, in some sense, an infinite number of options to choose from? I think we're going to explore that in another video. And until then, think about it. And I'll see you guys next time.